Hunting has always been a quiet deal in my family, and including for my entire childhood. My dad, my grandfather, and my great grandfather, and my dad's two brothers are decent hunters. They have been hunting all kinds of things like rabbits, deers, moose, and even when my uncles had told me stories about his trips to Alaska when he hunted bears, moose, and even wolverines, if he ever came across one. And in fact, I was about 12 when I was actually introduced, given my own hunting rifle, but I was like 14 when I was allowed to join my dad for my first hunt. Even at first, I didn't want even to do it. Of course, my dad didn't even force me. But since that my family have been hunters for at least a few generations, and I was like, maybe I would not break the family tradition in a sense. So I gave it a try, and I actually managed to shoot my own first deer when I was 14. The thrill, the excitement of my first prey. I was actually happy, and I could see the in my dad's eyes when I actually managed to fire the gun and hit my first deer. He was proud, but he said I probably won't be lucky to get a moose at that young age. He said he tried once but never managed to. But surprised to him, I was only like 17, but I managed to get my first moose. I was very excited. And this actually happened when I was with my dad and one of my uncles to Alaska. We actually have a family cabin in Alaska that has been, which my great grandfather built by hand. And I actually feel proud because even this day, sometimes I actually go to Alaska, either with my dad or other cousins or others, to just either for hunting or just simply summer vacation. I feel great deal, and I'm actually proud to call myself as a hunter, and I'm actually thinking about teaching this to my own kids one day when they're a little bit older, of course. I have a daughter and a son. But it's not about this in a part of family. My name is Joshua, by the way, and I'm 21 years old, and I wanted to tell you that's a story that's I there is no words other than terrified. I have had a sleepless night for months. I I feel like this is really hard for me to even describe this because I had even told this story for anyone except for just within a family. My whole family, including this extended family, knows about this story. I had only told this story to only a few handful of friends that I really trust. Other than that, I had not been telling this story for much. Since I did mention that sometimes I'm hunting in Alaska, I am actually living in the Washington state. I know I'm not the precise location since just for more privacy. But what it's not to tell you happened I was just only about when I was 19, and I was like, this is really heartbreaking story. And preparing for not because sometimes when I did tell this to some of my close friends, most of them didn't even believe me. And could I even blame them? Because even if they had been there themselves, it's unlikely they would even realized it themselves. But anyways, my story happens when I was with my best friend George. George is just only 1 year older than me. Sometimes people called us as inseparable twins. And well, even though we didn't look anything like each other, but we were close. He was my best friend. I even saw him like a brother, or well, like a brother type. But anyways, he was also a decent hunter like myself. We had decided to go on our hunting trip one of the fall of the year. And Since we want to try a new spot in somewhere, and since it was during the fall and we had, well, at least about during the weekend, or at least, well, for the weekend. So we had a permission from both of our parents and we packed our gear, tents in his car. At the time, I didn't have a license myself, but I'd had it some event sometimes after that. But it was just irrelevant part of the story though. But the trip actually went perfectly fine. Sure, we stopped a few times on the road, but we went to a spot that George had been to before at least once or twice. So when we came to the spot, we walked through the parking lot or at least the parking area, and we walked perhaps like maybe 20 or 25 minutes through dense woods. And I can say this woods was ancient. This some of the trees more likely had been at least a few hundred or maybe as a 1,000 years old. They was like an ancient woods, like some redwood trees and even some very old pine trees. I asked George how he even came across this place. Turned out that his family had been to this place before when he was younger, when he was just a kid. Well, they were summer camping from time to time. And he had been here at least twice, hunting with his dad. And now he thought maybe he wanted to share this place with me. And I asked him what kind of usually prey he can actually usually get here. He said that he's seen a lot of deers, a lot of moose, and even a few bears in a time, but mostly wild boars. I had even got a wild boar at this time, mostly deers and one moose, but I was really excited to maybe try to get my first wild boar. So we found a spot that was perfect for us to set up camp. And since we was going to be there for the weekend, we decided not to do any hunting the first day. Because me and George had decided that we wanted to scouting in the area to find any perfect spot to set up for hunting. Since George has been in this vicinity in this particular area before, so he knew at least they could find some good spots. So I trusted in his experience on this one. And since we both were at least new beginners or decent hunters. But after we scouted the area for quite some time, we found at least a few spots that we could actually manage to find either deer or wild boars. But we didn't know expecting to manage to get any much deer or wild boar or perhaps even a moose at the first day, you know. But after we had scouted the woods, we just walked around just to look around to see what else could be found. But after a while, George decided to go back to the camp, but I decided I wanted to continue my nature walk. I mean, I am an average outdoors person, and I love to be in the wild. I even brought my camera. I even took photos of the nature to show my parents, because they had told me that they want to know how this place looked like. So I promised to give some photos and to bring them back with them. After I've been with Dad for maybe an hour, I went back to camp, and George, he was, well, just sitting in his own tent, just reading a book, and we brought our own tents. For the first day, we didn't do much. We just talked much about our former hunting trips with our parents and our families. George had also been to my family's cabin in Alaska for a couple of times, and he liked it. I asked him if there was how big usually the game trails or the games are in this particular part of the woods. I also asked him if this is a national park, because I didn't want to be caught to being hunting illegally. And he said, no, this is not a national park. The nearest is just several miles away from here. And he knew that for sure. And he showed it on the map, and I knew what he meant. So I asked him if he had ever heard any strange sounds on the part of the woods. He looked at me surprised and asked what kind of sounds. He knew that I was much into the strange phenomena like aliens, Bigfoots, all that. And he If you're referring to like Sasquatch or as the people call it, Bigfoot, I nodded. He shook his head. No, I had never heard anything like it. I was curious because since Washington State usually has a lot of sightings, but I had to be honest, I wasn't even sure if this area that we were in was there any plenty or even any Bigfoot sightings. I would have loved to been able to see one or even manage to take a photo, but sure, even if by seeing one, that would be good enough. So that evening, we just have our decent food that we made, brought us just hot dogs and a couple of beers, and or at least he had beers, but I had just some soda pop or something like that. So for the next day, we actually decided to go to two separate places to get more to our own hunting. A better chance to get something. Of course, I went to one spot that he told me to go, and he went to one other. But we were having our walkie-talkies with us, so having to make sure that we remained in constant contact. It happened that he called me, asking if I'd seen anything. I said, nope, nothing to see here at the moment. And I was really feeling devastated, because during the first day, on during Saturday, during the Friday actually, since we came around there on Thursday, during the Friday, we didn't see anything. It was like the whole forest was completely empty. I was disappointed. But since we was going to be here for a whole weekend, and actually gave me a bit of hope, because I had this happen before to me when I was in Alaska or with my dad. So it is possible that we not had it first time. So during a second day on Friday or a Saturday, same thing. We didn't have any luck whatsoever. And even George started to say, well, maybe we should try to hunt some maybe squirrels or rats. I was like, squirrels and rats? They're probably not much to eat compared to like a deer, I said. He laughed and just was joking. Maybe we'll have to something good to go look tomorrow before we go home, he said. Hopefully. And I was feeling devastated or disappointed that we hadn't even had any luck for the past 2 days. Unfortunately, our luck would eventually change, because on Sunday, a couple of hours before we were supposed to leave, we went to two different spots this time. And I saw no much, but I did see some tracks of every deer and rabbits, but some of them were at least a few days, maybe a day old or a few hours old. So, but at least that there were signs of animals in this area, so I was happy that. But as I was hearing a sound in the woods, something big was moving. I was like, maybe this is a big deer or moose. But suddenly the sound stopped, and I was like, that's disappointing. Maybe a moment later, I reached out to George to ask if he had any luck, but he said no. But then and he suddenly interrupted. It's like, wait, I see something. Oh my god, he said. What is it? I think I see a bear. A bear? What? A brown bear? A black bear? Definitely a brown bear, he said. He could describe it as, he saw this brown fur, and he said, it's a little bit bigger than a brown bear, but it must be that one, or maybe this is just standing on something. But then suddenly, as he was about to shoot, he said, give me a second. But then, I heard on the walkie-talkie, tree knocking. Wait, tree knocking, I thought? George. I asked him if he heard that, and he confirmed he did. I told him, that is a classic Bigfoot sign, I told him. He laughed it off. It's like, maybe just a tree there or something that fell. No, that's clearly a tree knocking, and it happened again and again. But then suddenly, he told me to come over to his place because he started feeling a little bit uneasy. I told him I will be there in less than a few minutes, since we weren't that much apart from each other. But as I was walking, I literally heard the scream. But it wasn't a scream of an animal being shot or anything. It was a blood-curdling scream, like a bloody murder type of scream. It screamed, echoed through entire woods. It was George, because I heard him scream similar to that once, and I knew immediately it was George. And I ran as fast as I could, screamed for George to answer me. He did answer, but he only said, "Get away from me! Get away from me!" And I heard some gunshots. But his then screamed echoed once more, and he called out, "Joshua, help!" And then he cut off. I naturally ran up to this place where he was hiding. I found nothing. His hiding spot, what he had built, was completely trashed. I found just footprints of his, and something had dragged him. And I found blood, like fresh blood. And I found his hunting rifle, and the barrel had somehow been bent. That's almost impossible for even a normal human can do, considering a barrel is pure metal. And I screamed and screamed for George. I tried to I saw some dragging marks from this hiding spot deeper in the woods. I followed them with my barrel, my rifle in hand, on high alert. But suddenly, after being reached of some bushes, the drag marks was completely gone. I screamed and screamed for George, but no answer. Then I had to do what I had to do. I used my cell phone, and luckily it was a good signal out there. I called for the park rangers, as my friend had been attacked and been dragged away by an animal, and I don't know where or if he's okay. I didn't want to follow him since I didn't know what direction he was been taken. The park ranger informed me that he will be there in a few minutes with a couple of his co-workers. And he referred me to stay on the spot so they would know exactly where, and also yell out when I heard any truck. It took me maybe it's almost a half an hour to get on the spot. I told them where it happened. I wasn't even there, but I was maybe half away from this place. I told them, show them the blood, show them the track marks, and he showed them the barrel, and pointing where exactly to where at least the drag marks took off. But after that, nothing. Two of the park rangers, it was four of them, two went on the spot, looked around, and while the two others asked me, one of them asked me, one other just looked around in George's hiding spot. And he found, it looked George's footprints of his shoes and his barrel, and sure enough, it was pure blood. But the others came back and said they couldn't see any track marks or any dragging marks or any footprints. But they did see some blood, at least a few feet away from the bushes, but then it stopped. The ground was hard, so they wouldn't be leaving any footprints. I was devastated. My own best friend was now somewhere hurt, maybe killed by an animal. One of the main park ranger, the same one I talked on my phone, he called for the backup, and he even called the canine unit from the police. I was like, a canine unit? But I knew that there was a 50-50 chance that this could have been eventually that he could either been dead or alive. After all, dogs' smelling sense, or their smell, is way much stronger than a human. And they even after order for a police officer, or at least a police copters in the area. And after maybe another an hour, more cars, more people, several cop cars had showed up, and I could hear the helicopter in the area above us. Then a few of the cops the police officers talked to me, asked me questions. What I did see, if I heard anything, if I saw anything, if I saw anyone else in the woods, if I saw any animal in the area. I told them what I said, or at least what George told me, that he saw this animal with brown fur, but he said it was taller than in a brown bear. But he said it's possible that it could have been standing on something that made it look taller, and it's like I said, that was possible. That's possible that they could. And even when the officer said it's possible, since there is a lot of brown bears in this part of the forest. And despite how much they searched from the entire woods, there was nothing. And in fact, the police started to ask me a lot more questions and they actually saw me as the prime suspect. The main culprit, if I had to say, that I was the one who actually did this to my own best friend. I was like, what? Why would I do this to my own best friend? Why? After their initial questions at the site, I was taken into the police station in the nearest town, where they started questioning me more and more, interrogating me to demand to know if I did it or not. They saw me the main suspect, but though I wouldn't blame them because I was the only one, and there were no hunters other else in the Porter region. Because they had looked around any other campsites if there were any other people, but there weren't any. Your family had been called, and they were devastated. Their own son, their only son in fact, had been disappearing in the woods. And when they came to the police station the same day, they didn't blame me because they told the police that I would never do this. But the police didn't let me go, despite they even have informed my parents. But after about a day or so, they actually let me go because there were not any signs of I was not doing it. Because they found my hiding spot and my footprints, and it cleared my name. And George's family, especially his parents, they didn't blame me because they know would have done anything to save their son. After all, he was my best friend, and they didn't know that I saw him as a brother. Why would I even jeopardize or anything to hurt my own friend? Even his two sisters, one younger and one older, told me they believed my story. And despite when after all this, he was eventually declared dead legally, since even though they never found his body anywhere in the woods, despite the intense search, or even with some volunteers from the area. His case was declared as being killed by a bear, a brown bear for about to be exact. Despite this, but only a couple of weeks after all this happened, I decided to make my own investigation, and I looked around in the area, just carefully, and sure enough, okay, this might sound weird, but I did find evidence, or at least people that cited Bigfoots, particularly near in that area where I were with George. So I suspect this might have been the Bigfoot that actually found him, despite the tree knocking, which it is a classical sign of a Bigfoot. I told it to some of my friends, and some of them didn't even believe me, because some of them didn't even believe that Bigfoot was even real. But when I told his parents, they believed me, because they were strong believers that it might have been a Bigfoot because they had seen one themselves. But my family, though, well, they were very skeptical about such 7 to 8 or even a 10-foot creature could even exist so elusively in the woods. But I was like, well, if you don't believe me, and Despite this, it happened that some people did blame me for George's disappearance. Or someone actually thought maybe I knew something, but I never actually told them the whole story. But my friends, they believe me. And for this day, I blame myself for that I should have suggest that we would stay together in one space. But to this day, George, I hope you didn't suffer anything from that Bigfoot attack. And I know this might hurt, might feeling at least happy. I named my firstborn son after you. And all was that? I'm sorry, George. I'm sorry.